Hey everyone, welcome to Craven Something Scary, where it's all horror all the time. Now in this video, I'm going to discuss how Scream 5 contains within it what I believe are several subtle clues and breadcrumbs that could be the start of laying the foundation that will prepare us for the return of the one and only Stu Macher in either Scream 6 or in Scream 7, most likely. Either way, I believe the signs are there if you just look closer at them. Let's go! So when I saw Scream 5 for the first time, several things jumped out to me regarding Stu Macher, and after repeated viewings of the film, it has become even more clear to me that Radio Silence, Guy, and James, the writers, have already started laying the groundwork for the return of Stu to the franchise. Now, as I mentioned earlier, some of these clues here are very subtle. They're not going to bang you over the head with obviousness. They're just not going to do that. They can be very subtle and can be easily overlooked or just missed in general. However, after considering them all cumulatively, it makes the idea of Stu returning in Scream 6 or 7 a plausible scenario, especially if you watched my video yesterday on the 3 motives that Stu has to return that connect into the franchise. If you look at that video and now you watch this video, watch these back to back, and it makes a pretty cumulative case. All right. So now many of you have asked me to make a video pulling together what I feel are the clues from Scream 5 that point us to the direction of Stu, and that's exactly what I'm going to do now for all of you. So let's dive right into it now. Clue number 1, pointing to Stu's possible return in Scream 6 or Scream 7, is the opening phone call with Tara. So we have this question comes up where Tara says her favorite scary movie, right? Yes, what's your favorite scary movie? Tara says The Babadook. And then we hear on the phone Ghostface say this.
Isn't that a little fancy pants?
Tara then begins to basically explain how it's elevated horror. And we hear Ghostface say this.
That sounds kind of boring to me.
So how is this a clue, you're asking? Well, I'll tell you how it's a clue, because this is exactly what I would expect to hear Stu Macher say. He is an old school horror guy, okay? This dialogue immediately feels to me not like a friend or a peer group of Tara, but somebody much older than her. Because think about it. If this is someone in her friend group, if this is Amber or anyone that's calling her that is a peer in her same age range, they all know what elevated horror is. They know what A24 is and other studios and other movies that are out there making these kind of films that are classified as elevated horror. This is not some foreign concept. This person on the phone, they're like, what's elevated horror? What does that even mean? You know, that sounds kind of boring to me. This is not someone in her peer group. I just don't believe that. This is someone who's older, maybe a little bit out of touch with the current horror scene, old school. Even with the Babadook, what does he say? You know, isn't that a little fancy pants? This is clearly, you see, not someone that is into some of these newer concepts of horror. It's old school. It is back when it's slashers, it's old school horror. You guys know what I'm talking about, the kind of movies that we love to talk about here a lot on the channel. And also, whenever Ghostface asks Tara about Stab, he says, well, how well do you remember the original? And Tara says, it's super 90s. And the Ghostface goes, huh. And that kind of in that tone, the way he said, huh. It almost sounds like he's insulted by the comment. That super 90s, like, oh, okay. Illegitimizing the 90s is what it sounded like. That it's just the tone. It's like, how dare the first thing that she thinks of, when it comes to stab, is that in the movie, well, it's super 90s, not thinking about the person who's behind the events of what actually happened. Now, after saying all of that, even with all of that there, which is to me very telling, and it's subtle, like I said earlier, it's subtle, but if you're really paying attention and you're listening, it's also very, very clear to me. And then also, the clincher of the entire opening call, though, was how it ends with Tara. This is the one that clinches it for me, because when asked to name the killer in the original stab, of course, you guys know she said it's Billy Loomis. It's Billy Loomis, you MFer, I got you. And she thought she'd won. She thought she'd nailed it. And then Ghostface, though, was clearly not happy about her answer. And he replied by saying,
"The correct answer is Billy Loomis and Stu Macher."
You could tell right there how he responds, but when he says Stu Macher, he's got a very angry tone, ticked off, like, emphasizing Stu Macher, like you forgot this guy. You forgot who this person was, and does not sit well with Ghostface on the phone at all. Does not sit well with them. So I believe that this is the first clue right at the beginning of the movie that points to Stu's possible return. Now, you may be asking yourself, why does this matter? Like, what does this matter on this phone call? And again, it matters a great deal. It lends itself to motive. And again, I posted a video yesterday. I want to mention it one more time. The title of the video is Stu's Motives. You've got to go check it out after this video if you've not seen it yet, where I go into the details and connect the dots. But this definitely is important. It lends itself to motive. All right. Clue number 2 to Stu Macher's possible return in Scream 6 or 7 is the number of Stu references in Scream 5 and how they are crafted. Now, Scream 5 has 3 key Stu Macher references in the movie, and all 3 of them share a similar tone. Now, we see here the first one is Tara's phone call, which we just talked about. I won't rehash that again. Just covered that. That's number 1 reference. That's the first reference. Now, the second reference we get is when Sam and Richie are driving to Woodsboro after Wes calls Sam about Tara. And over here you've got Richie acting like he doesn't know what stab is and all this. And so she's explaining it. And so she says,
a guy named Billy Loomis and his friend.
So there you go. Billy and his friend. Not even calling out Stu Macher. Billy and Stu. No, Billy and his friend. Again, Stu Macher being dissed, even by someone who knows the story well, not getting any respect in the memory of these events at all. Just his friend, Billy's friend. And then we get a third reference to Stu Macher in this movie when Liv asks, when they're all at the Meeks house going over the recall rules, Liv asks, who is Stu Macher? And Dewey says,
Billy Loomis's accomplice, a real Looney Tune.
So yet again, that Radio Silence is making a point to show us here's another character in this movie who has no clue who Stu Macher is. That's 3 people, essentially. Well, I guess really 2, because Richie was faking it. But Sam still didn't reference Stu, so it's kind of 2.5. But 2 people that clearly Tara and Liv don't even know who the guy is. No respect, no at all acknowledgement whatsoever. And then Dewey just says he's Billy's accomplice, a real Looney Tune. And again, no respect whatsoever. So these very three prominent Stu references, none of them show respect to Stu. Two of them put Billy first, ahead of him, and the other reference does not say Stu at all. It's just his friend. Billy's not Billy's friend. So at the very best, Stu is an afterthought by the characters when remembering the past. You know, Billy and his friend, Billy's accomplice, is the common theme here going on. And one more thing to point out for clue number 2, and just in general, this movie, Scream 5, refers to Stu more times than any Scream sequel. And I do not believe it is an accident. I think it is by design. They want to bring Stu into the minds of the viewing audience because they're building it towards something bigger. And so how you lay groundwork is you subtly place clues. You subtly lay down situations like this where you bring them up 3 different times in the movie so that you are aware of this person's name. You understand who he is, Billy's accomplice, Billy and his friend. So now 2 times you reference it, and then in the opening, you tell the audience again who Stu Macher is. They are telling the audience 3 times in this movie who Stu Macher is. And why? Because it's important. There is a reason for doing that. So I'm telling you guys, the groundwork is there. If you don't think there's groundwork for Stu's return, you got to look a little closer. These are examples of groundwork. This is laying the foundation for a future payout. And so keep that in mind. And also, I didn't even put this as one of my clues, but the fact that Stu Macher's house is in this movie, technically, that's another reference to him. Because whenever Sidney calls Sam, he says, "You need to get out of that house." And she's like, "Why?" Because he says, "That's Stu Macher's house." So again, that's really a 4th reference now for Stu Macher in this movie. I said 3, I'm giving you a bonus one when Sidney calls her. And so the references are there. The name dropping is there. It's to get the audience to not be surprised when Stu returns. They're going to know who that is now. Oh, that's Stu Macher. That's who they were talking about a lot in Scream 5. Okay, so clue number 3 I want to mention that points to Stu's possible return in Scream 6 or 7 is that all of the references in Scream 5 to Stu Macher referred to him in the present tense. So if you think about the dialogue that we talked about earlier, I shared with you earlier, you know, Liv asks who is Stu Macher. Dewey says he's Billy's accomplice, a real Looney Tune. And then Sam tells Richie, Billy Loomis and his friend. So nowhere in this dialogue do we ever hear him in the past tense being spoken to as was, or, you know, back in the day, you know, before he died, he was Billy's accomplice. Anything like that they could have done. Now, I also want to say this. Even if they had mentioned him as being dead, that still does not mean he's actually dead. Because my number 1 leading theory right now to Stu returning is that his death was faked. It was a fake death anyway. So the characters already would think he was dead for the most part anyway, if they were to say that. But Radio Silence and the writing team, instead of going that route and saying he's dead or talking to him about the past tense like that, they actually do refer to him in the present tense, which I thought was very interesting. It caught my ear. Listen, when I heard Stu's name come up, I listening very closely to how they're talking about him, and they're all present tense discussions. So take that for what you will. I think it's something, because I always say there's no accidents in a Scream movie. Everything we see and hear is intentional. It's very much deliberate, and it's usually going to always be a part of the story. So I just want to mention that to you, because they may be planting the seed up to have Stu returning, and there'll be a whole backstory about where he's been, of course. So anyway, I won't spend any more time on that. Just keep that in mind. All the references to Stu in Scream 5 are in the present tense. So this leads me to my last and final clue for this video. It's clue number 4, pointing to Stu's possible return in Scream 6 or 7. And that is the phone call in Stu's kitchen in the finale of the film. If you remember, it's Sam and Sydney and Richie, and they're all in there, and Gail, they're all in the kitchen, and the phone rings, the landline rings in Stu's house. And all it shows unknown number on the caller ID. And then Sam says, "You should answer that." Or, "No, that's for you." And Richie looks at her and kind of smiles and chuckles, like, "Yeah." And he never answers the phone. Now, again, I understand the argument can be made this was Tara that was calling from the other room, and it was trying to be a distraction for Richie, and maybe somehow it would give Sam an upper hand. However, if that's the case, Sam did not act upon it. If that was, something that was deliberately planned when they were up there, and Sam was, going to be uncutting her from the duct tape. If this was part of the plan to distract Richie so that they could overtake him in the kitchen, it didn't work, because whenever the phone rang, Sam didn't move. She stayed crouched down in front of the oven. So I don't really see that. I think what this was not Tara calling. This might have actually been Stu calling to get an update. Maybe he thought it was already over. He's calling the house to find out what the heck is going on. If Stu was indeed the mastermind behind Scream 5, which I think he was involved. I think he was the individual that placed the dreaded ad, or I should say the dreaded post, where he recruited Richie and Amber. I think he's the one that placed it. He's doing this with more people. They're just the beginning. And that he actually was calling the house to get an update to find out what was going on, especially if he considered that maybe the events were already done. And that's why Richie didn't answer the phone, because he knew it was Stu calling the house. He did not answer the phone. And of course, right after that scene of the phone ringing, we see Tara with a crutch in her hands beating on Amber. So I just don't think that was Tara calling. I understand you can argue the case, and I can't say it wasn't Tara. Like, there's no definitive proof. I just think it was. I don't think it was. I think it was Stu on the phone. Well, guys, listen, I'm going to leave it there for this video. Those are 4 clues, I believe, that subtly point to the return of Stu Macher. I think they are breadcrumbs. They are laying the foundation of what's to be revealed in a future film. That's what breadcrumbs and subtle clues are for. They're supposed to get our minds aware of what's going on without realizing exactly what the plan is. So Stu Macher is no longer going to be someone the audience does not know if it's a new audience. And for us OG audiences, those clues are there for us to pick up on and identify them so that we will also be ready when the Stu train rolls back into Woodsboro or into college or wherever we're going with the franchise. Now, guys, listen, I want to know, what do you think about these clues and breadcrumbs in Scream 5 that point us towards Stu Macher's return? I want to hear your thoughts, your theories, ideas, all of it in the comments section below right now. So start leaving your comments. Let's discuss it. And I'm excited to see where we go in our conversations. All right. Well, that's going to be it, guys, for this update again. We'll be back soon with more Scream and other horror movie content. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, this is Craving Something Scary, where it's all horror all the time. Thank you for watching.